That's what's happening.
now. So, but they always, and I know you've done workshops and like are there specific things, let's say if you do a workshop, like what kind of skill set someone will be learning? Let's say a manager will learn and then to go back to the workplace and say, run a department, for example. Like what would they learn in a typical workshop you would offer?
Well, we could start with that one example I gave of assumptions, of recognizing first what is an assumption, and when you see it, you have to challenge it. You have to find out if it's true or not, because if it isn't true, and you proceed based on that assumption, you could be running into a disastrous situation.
Right.
And you can save a company a huge amount of money if you can find out if it's true or not. At least begin to seek some evidence for it, and not just accept it because, well, that's always the way we've done it.
Yeah.
So that's one thing.
Okay.
I also teach about frames of reference, which can be very, very powerful in terms of affecting people's thinking, which is simply perspective. If you have a particular perspective and it starts to cloud your thinking, then you need to be aware of that, because that can influence decision making as well.
But that would mean you have to be almost, that requires some self-awareness, or at least be open to, you know, almost challenging your own set of thinking.
Which gets into the third skill I teach, which is called metacognition, which simply means thinking about your thinking.
Right.
And if you start thinking about your thinking, you will begin to recognize that, maybe I'm making an assumption here. This is a particular point of view that I have based upon other experiences I've had, and is it really accurate? Is it going to apply in this setting?
Okay. Can you think of some leaders or some public figures that we have that you think, based on the type of dialogue that they have, how they interact with people, that you feel have some critical thinking skills, or they're using critical thinking in their ways of making decisions?
I think a lot of people do use critical thinking, but they're not aware of the specific name of the technique. I encounter that a lot in my classes, that people say, oh, I already know this, but I didn't know that this is what it's called.
So, I mean, I think sometimes I think about, especially in government, the way things are going, and you're thinking, okay, you're having a debate, you're having a conversation, you're supposed to be multiple views and be open to different things, but you don't really see people being open-minded and actually listening to different views. So it's almost like repeating whatever views that they came on board with, and nothing has changed toward the end. So when you look at whether it's Congress, or you're looking at how the president is currently, you know, his views, I think a lot of people are looking how he's very different from other leaders. I don't know if you noticed the same thing in terms of like how Obama is approaching things in comparison to past leaders we may have had, in terms of really thinking broadly and more globally about different views.
I think that it requires a certain degree of safety within any organization of business to, it's one thing to say you want people to speak their views and say what's on your mind. It's another thing if the company or business really encourages that by providing an atmosphere where people feel safe to do it.
Okay, yeah, which is very true. I mean, I think it's one thing to say it, but it's another way do people feel really comfortable to be open enough and share without feeling like they're going to be penalized or something will change halfway through that they weren't aware of in the beginning. So let's talk a little bit. So this is the book. So, you know, this is what people will find. So when they go on the website to order the book. So I wanted to go through a little bit to give us a sense of what's covered, a few of the chapters that are in there. I know what my favorite chapter is, but so what would people find? Like for those who haven't even seen the book yet, like give us a sense of what's covered.
Well, you can write at the table of contents there, and there are a variety of different critical thinking skills that I talk about. The specific ones I've already mentioned about frame of reference, assumption, metacognition. But I also talk about how stress can affect one's critical thinking ability. And basically, if you're stressed, you can't think critically.
You can't think, yeah. Well, that was that's the chapters that sort of hit home for me, because a lot of people are under a lot of stress. People have always been under stress, but now it seems sort of more visible. I think we realize that whether it's money or whatever other issues that they're dealing with. And so, you know, how would they use critical thinking? Sort of, are there some activities or certain things that they can start doing, applying critical thinking to reduce stress?
Well, the first step is you have to reduce the stress level. And I provide some specific techniques in there, such as one of them I think I call the recent pleasant experience, where you simply stop whatever you're doing and take time to focus on something that's pleasant, something
Okay.
that happened recently that made you feel good. What that does is force your attention away from the distress,
Right.
and then you can begin to think clearly again. Because if you try and think critically or doing any kind of major decision-making when you're stressed, you probably